Do you struggle with repeat disappointment? Do you struggle with using your phone to escape stress or things that you cannot control? Do you want to achieve a greater sense of interior peace and interior freedom that lasts longer than 1 minute? This and more is what we are going to be unpacking on the Possibility Mom Live. Let me begin this conversation with many things come out, become content because my husband and I have had a fight. And that is 100% just with full transparency where this is coming from today. So I don't think I need to share with you or spill out that it is a very challenging time in the history of the world. We are still dealing with a global pandemic. We are now dealing with some pretty tragic global situations with Afghanistan. There was a recent earthquake in Haiti. I mean, like, the list goes on and on. I really I actually always hesitate to list things because um they're just there it's countless, or at least it feels countless, right? How many things are going on in the world. And I personally have had a very challenging, I would say, last 2 weeks. As many of you, if you've been following along, you know that I launched recently a brand new group coaching experience. And so there's always, for me, a lot of mental gymnastics, mental hard work that goes in when I launch something new. And then couple that with the return to school for my kids and the increased global unrest. And of course, the increase in talking about things like coronavirus and variants and all the things. I would say that this week, my soul has very much not been at peace. And it all came to a crushing implosion yesterday in a pretty epic, I would say, like, you could call it a pretty epic fight with my husband. And it didn't help that it was like 11 o'clock and, like, just it was probably not the time to be talking about intense world situations and intense, global crises. Probably not the best timing, but the benefit for all of you is that it bore fruit, some incredible content. So what I really want to get into today are things like the following. Do you struggle with repeat disappointment? Meaning, is there a theme in your life that you see over and over again that you also see yourself dealing with in a similar way? So do you struggle with repeat disappointment? And then do you escape stress and events in the world, for example, that you cannot control, whether it's local to you or globally across, the pond, across a very far amount of, distance? Do you struggle with dealing with all of that and instead choose to escape in maybe unhealthy ways, like escaping with your phone? And this is what I was finding was happening to me over this last week. I couldn't really pinpoint it, to be honest. I was like, so the week that I was launching my brand new group coaching, which was, I think, now about 2 weeks ago from time of, recording this episode, that was to be expected. I always go through a little bit of like vulnerability, obviously, and kind of all that kind of stuff, like just putting myself out there, especially this time doing something that felt, at least to me, a little bit new. And so that I kind of like understood where some of that tension or anxiety or stress was coming from in me. But for the last week or so, maybe a little bit more of that, and I noticed it when my kids went back to school, I could just feel this sort of underlying unrest where I couldn't pinpoint it. I wasn't sure what was going on. I'm careful to use the word anxiety because, my husband has clinical anxiety, diagnosed clinical anxiety. So I know very much what that looks like. But just this feeling of a a stress or a fear or a challenge that I could not pinpoint. And as a result, oh my word, the amount of time I was using my phone for literally no good. Like just scrolling on Instagram, checking my apps for notifications, online shopping, and it was becoming a problem because it was keeping me up late. And I am, 21 weeks pregnant with my ninth baby. I wake up early to exercise several times a week, and so I really am feeling it this time around, being pregnant at 37 years old and for the ninth time with a very active home. I really need my sleep, so it was becoming a problem over the last week. And I just was like, I've got to figure this out. And there was a really funny moment just a couple days ago. And I'm going to put this in my Instagram highlights because I knew it was going to strike a chord with people, but it struck like the whole entire, gamut of notes available in a chord. My inbox was flooded with people responding. And essentially what I said was that I need to remind you of something because I needed that reminder in the moment. You really have to know this about me, you guys. When I create content, it's because I need it. Just straight up. I create content from the things I experience in my life, almost always in real time. And so I picked up my phone and I was like, I have to remind you of something. The comfort you are seeking, you aren't going to find it here. And I remember I literally was like looking at pretty picture after pretty picture on Instagram. I really like home decor content. So I was like, I kept looking and it was literally like with every swipe, I was like, I'll find it here. I'll find it here. I'll find it here. And as I could hear myself almost saying that exact phrase, like the perfect coffee table will make me feel comfortable. The perfect carpet for my living room will make me feel comfort. I was like, oh my gosh, no, like it's not going to come from here. Put your phone down and go to sleep. It's just not going to come from here. And it just made me realize, oh, like I think I need this reminder. Like I need this reminder big time. And I need the reminder that I don't have to run from these challenges. But here's the thing. How do you do that? And I asked this question on Instagram, and throughout this podcast, I'm going to share some of the comments and questions people asked me and kind of integrate it into this content. But here's the thing that I really do believe, and the thing I think I kind of lost track of over the last week, especially as I've been navigating things like coronavirus in my community, and of course, the increased global tensions in Afghanistan, especially. I really do believe that every mom can achieve interior peace with the following 5 steps. And you might like these steps, you might not like these steps. If you do not like them, I invite you to throw them out. If you don't like them, it's all good. But this is what works for me. This is what has worked historically for my clients. A lot of this is content that I have received, or coaching that I have received, concepts like cognitive behavioral therapy, many of the concepts that I have learned as becoming a Catholic coach through Metanoia Catholic's Purgative Way. I'm going to be mentioning many resources, but there are truly, I think, these 5 steps. And again, you might modify these for yourself, but some version of these 5 steps I really think are going to help. And I really do believe in my heart of hearts that every mom, that every person, that every woman, man, everyone with a rational brain can achieve interior peace by following these 5 steps. Let's get into it. Step number 1 is to not argue with reality and instead accept your circumstance. Now, to tell you why I think this is important, I want to share with you a story. And this really was so helpful to me this week as I was unpacking, why is there this like underlayer of stress or tension that I'm feeling? And, without getting into all the details, because obviously I like to keep some details of my life private. Shocker. But yes, I like to keep some details of my life private. My children's school was having a a bit of a challenge with masks, meaning at first it was like, we are not going to use masks. And again, coming back to school, that was the announcement made back in, I want to say like June, maybe, or sometime in the summer. There's going to be no masks. And then shortly before school, it was announced masks are back. And here are all the reasons why. And I'm not going to get into, are masks effective? Are masks not, or what have you? That's not, we're just not going to go there. But it, of course, caused some tension in my community because obviously some parents were um, felt very strongly about the freedom to choose what they want for their children. Other parents were like, this is keeping us all safe. Like there was just so many different opinions. I had no idea like how to, I'm a compliant Canadian over here. Like this is like what I joke about all the time. The US has a very different, I would say, temperature, if you will, for civil liberty. It's just, and that's just not an opinion in my opinion. I believe that's a fact. There is a very strong emphasis on civil liberty in the United States, which makes total sense based on, how this country was founded. I feel very blessed to be here. But as a Canadian who did not grow up with this same kind of, whatever you want to call it, anthropology, let's say, I still find it a very interesting thing to navigate my own response. So there was that. And then, of course, the talk about this variant and vaccinations and all these kinds of things. I was starting to see more and more communities, cities mandating mandatory vaccinations, all these things. And it just was causing me to feel, again, this unrest that I couldn't pinpoint. And I was able to pinpoint it in a conversation with my husband. Thank you, Josh Canning, for dealing with all of the things in my brain. And I finally had to admit to myself that coronavirus is not over. I think I had been, up until that point, fighting with that reality. Like just telling myself, oh my gosh, it's over. Like it's over. We've got the vaccine, and where I live, masks no longer are necessary. People were starting to feel, at least where I live in Florida, this sense of like, okay, we're kind of getting back to normal. There was lots of conversation, at least in my neck of the woods, of conversations around getting back to normal, whatever that means. And I definitely held on to that like it was, like just like oxygen. I held on to that. And what I observed and what was so, so, so helpful to myself was to just accept the reality. No, it's not over. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Like just to accept the reality. So step number 1, don't argue with your reality. Get the facts and then simply just accept the circumstance. You don't have to like the circumstance. You don't have to agree with the circumstance. But I think we do more damage to our interior peace and freedom when we try to argue with reality. Another thing that I think comes into play here that I always like to encourage my clients to be aware of is your natural temperament. So if you're not familiar, and we can put a link in the show notes for a resource to this quiz. There are 4 natural temperaments. This comes from ancient Greek origins. And it's the sanguine, the choleric, the melancholic, and the phlegmatic. I talk about this often because I do think it's a very helpful tool, helpful lens for us to see how we view the world. And very briefly, it just simply is there are different ways that we are naturally inclined to respond to things, to view things. I am a sanguine choleric, which means that I love people. I am extroverted. I am energized by people and events and fun. I love fun. But I'm also extremely choleric, which means that I love things my way. I need to be in control. Now, why this can be incredibly helpful. So to understand your temperament, why this can be incredibly helpful is this relationship to how you view reality. And so, for example, you might be like, why do I have to be in control all the time? Why do I have to have things my way? Like, I should be over this by now, quote unquote. I coach a lot of people, or I have in the past coached people who say things like, I'm blank years old. I should be over this. Or I say this all the time to my spiritual director, like, why does this keep happening? You'd think I would learn by now. But here's the thing, that's fighting with reality. You may have a general, like just an inclination, an inherent inclination to view the world in a way that you just simply need to accept. Now, can we get coaching? Can we get training? Can we learn how to grow in these things? Absolutely. And I feel like if you're following me for a while, you know that that's like my big part of the work that I do, helping women to grow in virtue, helping women to understand this is how you're naturally hardwired. But of course, there is a wonderful, what StrengthsFinder calls a balcony to that, but also a basement to that. There are ways that we can grow, and it's necessary for us to grow. But I do believe it's also so necessary to accept it as our reality. Accept that I see the world this way, and it's neither good nor bad. It is simply neutral. This is the way I generally am inclined to view things. I can absolutely grow, but let's accept that reality as opposed to fighting it. So that is step number one. Do not argue with reality, accept your circumstance. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but you have to accept that that is your reality. Step number two is to take the time to actually feel the feelings. And again, I want to start this section with a story. I was working with my mindset coach, the beautiful Erin Ingold from Metanoia Catholic. And I was telling her about a situation in my business that I was sort of disappointed in. And that is an area of repeat disappointment for me. I am very aware of my triggers around success and failing and control and all the things. And I was just like, all I want to do, I was feeling sad, I was feeling disappointed. And I was like, all I want to do is crawl into my bed and cry. And she was like, you should just do that. And I just remember hearing that, and I was like, that is so liberating. And Metanoia Catholic has done quite a few podcast episodes in this arena, this talking about dealing with disappointment, talking about buffering, and how to actually just feel the feelings and how they are not bad. So, and we'll link those for you in the show notes for sure. But take time to actually feel the feelings, which might literally mean go to your bed and cry. It might literally mean, a healthy release of anger. It might literally mean sitting there with a journal and simply writing about the feelings that you are feeling. And, when I talked about this on Instagram and I was asking for some feedback from you all, I got a few questions that I want to address. So, for example, how can I express emotions while letting my kids know that I'm okay and that it's okay to do so? And that's what this step is inherently about. It's actually damaging to not feel your feelings. This is like cognitive behavior therapy. Like, if we just dismiss and diminish and try to sort of suffocate our feelings, it is not going to work out for us in the long run. It is so much more strategic and necessary to give those feelings a safe space to be. You don't have to stay in it forever. And that's the key that we're going to talk about next, but just feel it. And if you find it hard, like this person said to me on Instagram, I find it hard to just sit with the feelings and emotion. If I try, I can't do it for long. I would say don't do it for long. I would say just feel it, allow them the space that they need, and then we can move on. And our next step is going to help with that. How do you rest well in the midst of loss of emotions instead of just numbing? Again, I think this is the key. Like you simply have to, you'll just numb forever. That's what was happening to me this week. I was having these intense feelings of fear, of anxiety, of, am I making the right decisions for my family? All these kinds of things. And so I was simply just like, instead of addressing them and giving them space, I was simply just running from them again and again and again with every single swipe. And that you will continue to run. This is the problem. You will continue to run from those emotions if you don't address them. So, how do you do this with young children around? This is an amazing question. And this was probably the most asked question when I post this over on Instagram at Lisa Canning. I've got small kids. Right now, I have two small kids, ages 3 and 1. I am often, like when my children are home from school, I am often surrounded by small children. And so, of course, this can seem like a daunting task. How do I feel these feelings when I have a bunch of small kids around? That leads me to step number 3: get out of your head. So, if you have got small children around and you can do the kinds of things like put the TV on and then excuse yourself so that you can go and have a good cry, or set them up with an activity, so that you can of course go and just manage your own emotions. If you can do that, I recommend you do that for step 2. But if you cannot do that in the moment, and here's a couple things, like make an appointment for yourself to do it later, right? If you cannot remove yourself from your children for whatever reason, make yourself an appointment to deal with your emotions, to listen to your emotions later on. But if you cannot, and in addition to after you have given your emotions some feeling, step number 3 is to get out of your head. And this is a really important one, right? And so this one applies if you're able to remove yourself from your children or you are not. We get out of our heads by being immensely present to the moment. And this is a skill. This is a skill, and I believe that it's one of the most important skills in motherhood. Because without it, we just buffer. Without it, we just go on our phones and escape our kids, but then come out of that, maybe hour, if you're anything like me, of scrolling aimlessly, still feeling that feeling of discontent. It only barely just like scratched an itch. You're still itchy afterwards, right? And so it is so much more effective, impactful, essential to learn this skill of getting out of your head and just being present in the moment. And what this helps us with is this comment that I received on Instagram, that there's no time to deal with the emotions because it's exhausting dealing with the logistics of it. What if it really was as simple as get out of your head? And here are a few strategies that I love and that I do almost every day, basically every day. And I let these, I kind of forgot about these this week. Or when I would remember them, the pull of my phone was more powerful. And I kind of let my will dictate what I was going to do here. And so here are a couple strategies that I really love. Number 1, go outside. This was a huge reason why we moved to Southwest Florida, so that we could truly be outside as much as possible. So number 1, go outside. Number 2, play with your kids, but I'm actually talking like play with them, not on your phone beside them while they're playing. I'm talking like take a tennis ball and go outside and throw it to each other. Like go play catch. Go and grab. I think this is why I love water so much as well. When you are in the water with your kids, like naturally, because of safety, and you're not on your phone because your phone will get broken in the water. I love, love, love water for this reason. Like just be present to them. Walk barefoot. This is like a funny one that my husband has really been embracing. It's called grounding, where you are just like outside. I remember I did an interview with Dr. Greg Bottero from the Catholic Psych Institute, and he talked about that this is a practice he does every single day, that he will walk outside barefoot to feel that feeling of grounding and that feeling of reality. I'm recalling a story he told me in that interview where we talked about how young children just do this so naturally. They find a box and they do stuff with it. They can take a cup of water and pour it into other little containers seemingly endlessly. They can be so present to their surroundings. The other day, we had a big rainstorm, as is very common where I live in Southwest Florida. And I decided to go outside in my covered porch with my infant daughter, Colleen. And she toddled over out of the covered area to our gutter, like the rain spout, where water was rushing down. And she, in the rain, sat there just putting her feet, her little tiny toes, like, and she just kept lifting one foot into the stream of water and then the other foot into the stream of water. And she must have sat there just feeling the sensation of water on her feet for a good 15 minutes. Like, it was just so remarkable to watch. So do these things, like, and this is what makes the logistics not difficult, because when you are just simply in the duty of the moment, and this is what I think is interesting, like what I have observed of having so many children for so many years. Like, I've always had a young child in my house. Like, we really have not had many, if any, breaks from having either an infant or a toddler. All of my children are approximately 18 to 22 months apart. In fact, this baby and Colleen is the longest gap we've ever had. If this baby comes on its due date, it'll be almost exactly 2 years. Anyway, but this is one of the things that I have found. Children have a natural way of pulling you out of your head. And so actually just do that. Just do the next right thing right in front of you, your duty of the moment, and just do it. Go and sweat, like exercise, walk, run, play. And then on the sweating, go have some sex. And I'm talking like loving, intimate, not escapism. Like, I'm talking just like intimate with your spouse, intimacy, because there is something truly unique and remarkable about the act of marriage that can obviously get you so firmly grounded in reality, you know? Um, anyway, I could talk about sex all day, but I don't know. I'm always very, Mom, do not listen to that episode. Okay, so that is step number 3, is just get out of your head. And this is what will help you with maybe what feels like an overwhelming challenge, like the logistics. You don't need a babysitter. You don't need an elaborate setup to get out of your head. It can be as simple as a choice in a very specific given moment to get on the floor and play with your kids. I remember one of my, I had a therapist, or sort of early in my young adulthood, and he would say things like, even just like do things like this, like feel, like force yourself to feel reality by running your hand up and down your own arm, like by doing something very tactile that forces you, like being barefoot, that forces you into reality. All right, so that's step number 3. And then step number 4 is to choose the thought that will bring peace. Now, this is what caused my husband and I so like an epic fight. This was the place where we were kind of just missing each other. I think I was coming to him in a place of like incredible despondency and despair and vulnerability. He was coming to me in this place of despondency, despair, and vulnerability. And I think we kind of just literally missed what each other was saying. Because here's the important thing. We have since resolved it. This is one of the benefits of being married for so many years. We'll be married 14 years this December. And this is just one of the incredible benefits of being married so many years, that we just like get over things pretty quickly at this point. It wasn't always the case, but this is not being glib. Like, this is why this is step 4. Okay. You don't do this in the beginning. If you try to like, this is the Metanoia Catholic has a podcast on the danger of positive thinking, because that can be dangerous. If you are, like, for example, this was what my husband and I were kind of getting into last night. If somebody's spouse has just died, right? and you go up to them and you literally say something like, well, I mean, at least you didn't have any kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can think thoughts that will bring you to peace, but we can't just sort of jump to these quote unquote positive or helpful thoughts, like I like to frame them, when we are in a period of intense pain. It actually can be very damaging to do so. So that's why step 1 and 2, don't argue with your reality, accept the circumstance, like, this is bad, I feel sad, and then actually feel the sadness. Like, these are really important steps. And only after that can we actually go here, which is to choose the thought that will bring peace. And there are a couple things I want to quote here that I think are really helpful. And my favorite thing that I think, Catholics and non-Catholics, Christians and non-Christians, I think can gain a lot of wisdom from, although this is a very Christian place. But it's the work of Jacques Philippe. And I really, really, really just think that there is so much to be gained from his books. He has several, but probably the one that I love to reference the most is Interior Freedom, and then Finding and Maintaining Interior Peace. And I just want to share my screen with you and share a few quotes from his work that I think can be so, so, so helpful. And so one of them here is real freedom does not mean being ruled by one's impulses from one moment to the next. Just the opposite. Being free means not being a slave to one's moods. It means being guided in a course of action by the fundamental choices one has made, choices one does not repudiate in the face of new circumstances. And then another one that I think is really, really helpful in a very similar kind of vein is this one here. The more God is at the center of our lives and the more we expect everything from Him and Him alone, the better chance our human relationships will have of being well, balanced, and happy. This is very related to what Metanoia Catholic calls the thought trajectory. Brooke Castillo over the Life Coach School calls this the model. This can also be referred to as straight up cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is simply the concept, and this is where I have recently received so much training in, and I do this basically every time I coach a client. All my group coaching now has this infused into it. And it is simply this understanding that it's not our circumstances that bring interior peace. It's how we think about those circumstances. And how do we know this to be true? We know this to be true because some people love roller coasters. I find them abhorrent and reprehensible. You could not pay me to take a roller coaster. Some people love spicy food. Other people do not. Some people love, praise and worship music, let's just say. Other people do not. Like, it's not our circumstances. It's not like the thing. It's not how nice our house is. It's not, whatever. It's how we think about our situation that brings the peace and freedom. And if you want to challenge me on this, I welcome you to do it. But it's just, this is another one of those realities that you can't argue with. It is simply a reality. It's not our circumstances. Now, changing our circumstances, will that help us out in life? Of course. If you are a mom like me with a bunch of small kids, but you don't have any way of getting a break, yes, you can think thoughts that will lead you to freedom, but you also need to physically just have breaks sometimes. And so it's necessary and will be helpful. But I'll never forget when we first got ourselves a nanny. Princess, I miss you and I love you so much. Her name was Princess. And I'll never forget, I had just had James, our sixth baby, and I had been so used to that point, constantly holding a baby and doing 1,000 other things at the same time. And in this place of constant sort of like frenetic, like this. And I'll never forget the first day she started working, she was like, "Here, let me take the baby. You can finish your breakfast." And she took the baby from me. And I was like, oh my gosh, never forget this feeling. Like, I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like, I don't have to do 7 things at the same time. I remember literally sitting down. I had this white sofa that was tufted and beautiful. And I remember sitting on the white sofa and being like, you are never allowed to complain about being busy or overwhelmed again. And then what happened? 3 weeks later, I remember exactly. I remember I was like, I'm so busy. Like that pattern of like kind of my old circumstances came right back. And this is what I'm saying. This is why I really feel convicted about this. It is so easy to fall back into old patterns if we don't develop new thoughts, regardless if we change our situation or not. Okay. And so this is very much an important thing to remember. Um, you can think a thought that will bring you freedom. You can borrow from scripts that other people have written. You can also draw from scripture. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I might be misquoting. Hold on, let me actually pull it up. But this is an important, essential thing to remember, that by our thoughts, we can achieve freedom. And Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I always like to make sure I'm quoting scripture properly because I can paraphrase a lot of things. Alrighty, which then brings me to step number 5. And this is a very, very practical step. And it is simply to increase your awareness of when you buffer and then develop a plan for how to tackle that in the future. So let's define the terms. What do I mean by buffering? Buffering is stuff like this, like just the scroll, the scroll, the scroll. Buffering can be things like online shopping. Buffering can be things like cleaning your house. Buffering can be things like diving into work or avoiding work. There's a multitude of ways that one can buffer, but essentially, it's you are numbing yourself from the feeling. Okay. And this is important because it will come up again, like it did for me. I am a trained mindset coach. I have, probably at this point now, 10,000 hours of both receiving training and actually coaching clients, both in groups and one-on-one. And I forget this for myself sometimes. And you want to know why we do this? Because we are fallen human beings, inclined to things like sin, inclined to things like worldly, challenges. And this is why, as a Catholic, I believe so much in the sacraments. I believe so much in what our church offers. And if you ever want to talk about what that means for you, I'm always ready and willing to have a conversation with anyone who is curious about what that means. But it's a very, like, there is too much at stake if we don't become aware of how and why we buffer. Because, like, for so many of the reasons I've already expressed in this podcast, they will just keep coming back. Like, meaning, if you don't deal with the thing that's really bothering you, whether it be stress, whether it be a world event, whether it be, getting a medical procedure, whether it be making a hard decision, that thing is actually just always going to be there. I did an episode on this podcast with Dr. Christine Lee, and we'll link that for you in the show notes. And we did it all on procrastination and why people procrastinate. All you're doing when you procrastinate, if you will, buffering they're not exactly the same, but you can certainly put them in the same little category. All you're doing is delaying pain. Like, you're just delaying something you have to deal with anyways. And so this is why this is so important. To have emotional command, to have emotional control allows your life to operate just a lot more smoothly, allows you to bring more peace in your home. And As mothers, we are the gatekeepers of peace in the home. I really believe that mothers hold a unique role. Not to say that dads can't do this, but I believe that there's a steady constancy to the way that mothers are involved in things like the rhythmic routines and patterns of meals and baths and changing and nursing and diapers. Like, moms are, I think, inherently and more innately almost like dialed in or inclined to notice more those cyclical routines and rhythms, which is why I really do believe that moms are the gatekeepers of peace in the home. And so I'm going to give a couple of practical things. I've made some notes here, and feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you have questions about how to deal with these specific kinds of things, or if you have a vice or a challenge that you find you go to repeatedly for repeat disappointment, for repeat escapism, feel free to put it in the comments. So number one is the phone. So phone scrolling that takes you out of reality. Here are a couple really, really simple, helpful tips. Number one, set actual time limits on your phone. You can do this in the digital wellness area of your phone on an Android, or the screen time area. And you'll find that in your settings. So go into your settings, and then it's either digital wellness on your Android or screen time on your iPhone. And you can set limits for how long you use Instagram, how long you use Facebook, how long you surf the internet. And it will tell you, you know, hey, you've only got 5 more minutes remaining or whatever, and it will tell you when you've reached your limit. Now, of course, you have the option to extend it by a minute, extend it by 5 minutes, or ignore it completely. And of course, that's when we have to rely on infused grace. That's when we have to rely on so much more than our willpower, if I'm being honest. And there might have to be some accountability there and whatnot, but you can set physical limitations on your phone to help you where you're perhaps not so naturally inclined. I have people in my coaching groups who have alarms that go off on their phone for literally things like, literally like a reminder of a script. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, or to literally get on the floor and play with their kids at given time blocks. So you can use your phone as a way, it sounds funny, but to help you be more present in your daily life. Okay. If online shopping is your thing, I would say that it's similar. Time limit. It's we need to take care of our families. We need to, of course, buy things and find things that are going to help them out. But it can become a problem if we are doing an extraordinary amount of price comparison shopping, or we are, constantly looking at reviews, or we are simply allowing it to be a place of great distraction. So essentially, set a time limit, and to remember that there is dopamine released in your brain when you buy something because you're excited about it. And so to remember that that dopamine is temporary, and no amount of buying, no amount of saving money, no amount of coupon, and looking for different little coupon codes online is going to produce sustained happiness. These are all going to be just temporary little hits. And so to remember that. And then I would say, in a similar way, excessive news. I think watching the news excessively can 100% be buffering. And so again, time limits and just simply rhythms and routines. I don't think it's wrong, obviously, to stay attuned to the events of the world, but we can't allow it to get in the way of the will of God in our lives, which is to know, love, and serve him, and serve the people that he has put in front of us. We can't be so engrossed in the news that we're not making dinner, or we're not tending to our duties. And so just again, time limit, and to just give it that limit. Just be like, all right, this is my time, and then it's going to be over. Like, it's going to have a natural end. I think that can be really helpful. So to set yourself up in advance with some of these strategies, I think can be, a lot more strategic than trying to do it in the moment, because when we're in the moment, we are weak. When we are in the moment, we are more inclined to fall to our human inclinations, which again is just a reality and not something to be too hard on ourselves for. But if we can put some of these structures in place beforehand, I think it really serves us well. And this is how we, for people who struggle, like women told me on Instagram, it feels like I've been in a rut for a long time and I don't know how to snap out of it. I believe that being aware of why you buffer and developing a plan and following these 5 steps. And let's just one more time. Number 1, do not argue with reality, accept your circumstance. Number 2, take time to actually feel the feelings. Step number 3, get out of your own head. Step number 4, choose the thought that will bring peace, because there always is a thought that will bring peace. And then step number 5, increase your awareness of when you buffer and develop a plan. My friends, we're the gatekeepers of peace in our homes. Our children, our husbands rely on our ability to, for us to, and this is not to increase the pressure, but I really do believe it is our duty and a gift that we can be to our families by learning these skills. It's why I believe so much in coaching and personal development, especially with a Christ-centered lens, because all these things, the challenges, the stress, the frustration, actually help us become the person we are meant to be. We are all saints in the making. We are all here temporarily. And this is the thing that I think brings me, at least, the most hope, that the suffering and the challenge, which are significant sometimes and can feel debilitating, can actually be for my good, for my benefit, not for woe, but for a future full of hope. If you found this podcast helpful, I would love for you to share it with a friend. I would love for you to leave it a review on wherever you love to listen to podcasts. Give this a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button on YouTube. It is a pleasure doing this with you, and we will see you next time on the Possibility Mom Live.